Welcome to the Inner Fire Climbing Podcast. This is Jesse Firestone. My guest today on the show is Ollie Torr. Ollie probably needs no introduction, but if you haven't heard of him, he is one of the founding coaches of Lattice Training, which I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not know who they are. But they're a huge training company run out of the UK. A few months ago, Ollie interviewed me for the Lattice podcast, and even though he had some bullet points, we wound up talking for a couple hours about all kinds of stuff related to coaching and climbing, and spiraled off into lots of weird corners. And it was such a fun and productive chat that I wanted to have Ollie back on my show, and he was gracious enough to say yes. And unsurprisingly, we kind of did the same thing here. Sort of had a short list of topics that I wanted to try to cover. And we did touch on a lot of those things. But truthfully, it's just one of those conversations where I think Ollie and I have enough crossover in the way we think about climbing, but also enough really interesting differences in our experience that it just, you really can't tell where it's going to go. But we just kept finding ourselves on interesting topics, and time flew by rather quickly. There's a lot in here, especially if you are a coach or a self-coach, which most climbers really are self-coaching when it comes down to it. So anyways, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Ollie Torr, and I will just drop you in right when I push the record button. I'm doing good, man. I also don't like looking too closely at what my camera shows of my face, or looking too closely in the mirror.
I'm trying this out because I'm at home. Does it sound all right to you?
Yeah, I think it sounds great.
Sweet. Cool.
Sounds good. It sounds good. It looks very, very crisp.
Yeah, I just can't believe how tired I look. I can believe it how I feel, but I'm surprised at how it looks.
Yeah, I feel the same thing. I keep getting older, and I still feel very energized and like ready to go, especially when it's climbing time or coaching time. But yeah, then I catch myself in a mirror, or I see a picture of myself, and I'm like, whoa, what is that guy?
Yeah. We've, good thing for the podcast. We just celebrated our 10 years since we registered for Lattice.
Nice.
And yes, we had like a bit of a team party and a bit of a quiz and all that kind of stuff, and seeing some old pictures of me because I think when we officially started I was about 23, something like that, and then when we registered I was 25 or 20, just under 25, and it's wild looking back now. Like, coaching like destroys you.
Really? Is it the coaching that's doing
no
the
it's just life, isn't it?
But yeah, I was just wondering about that too, because, I worked with Lattice right before COVID, I want to say, and then a little bit into COVID. And then I started coaching not long after I stopped working with you guys. And you guys literally paved the way. I was like, I have skills to do something like this, but work with people a little more locally to me. And I was wondering about the timeline too. And it's been almost 5 years since I started as well. So.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, hasn't it? The environment of climbing, performance, coaching, and we've got some big plans coming up in the next year or two, and which like people will hear about in the next kind of couple of months. But I guess we're constantly trying to guess the next phase of like progression in this area, and yeah, it's exciting. It feels like the next wave's about to happen with technology and everything. So. Yeah, it's kind of cool that I feel like I've seen 2 life cycles now, maybe 3.
Yeah, I won't ask any prying questions. Don't worry, your secrets are safe.
Cool.
How long have you been climbing?
I've been climbing since I was sort of 16, 17, really. I did a very, very small amount when I was younger with my dad and my brother. My brother was a bit of a climber, but I was at gymnastics 6 days a week, so I would join them at the climbing wall. I would go up a jug ladder and say, this climbing thing's easy, and then not do it again. But then when I was 16, 17, I worked at an outdoor centre. I was a freestyle kayaker, and someone taught me climbing. So I did a little bit then, and then just got really into it around sort of college years for me.
Nice. I have a distinct memory of at some point my lattice coach giving me ring ring eyes, Y's, and T's, I think, or one of those similar exercises, and you were the person doing the demo, and I was like, that doesn't look so bad. This guy makes it look pretty easy, and it's I mean, you could totally tell you're a gymnast from the way that you were doing it, because it's just like totally calm, like placid face, like a cow on a field, basically, but just like perfect execution of the
I mean, I'm quite short as well, so I always get the benefit of the short levers. But it's always like, if you run past someone in a race or something, or it's the old Lance Armstrong thing, which might be less poignant these days. But go right up to the person and then keep a very straight face and act calm, like nothing's hurting you, and then you carry on and you start puffing away. So I'm sure as soon as I pulled out of that movement, my face was probably a bit more expressionful, but in the moment for the shot, calm as a cow.
Yeah, this is totally left field, but that really reminds me of like in my early days of climbing. My buddy Kevin was really into like filming stuff, and so he always had a camera out, and we just thought, in those days there was no YouTube or anything yet, so it was all like Dosage and those kind of movies. I think Dead Point magazine was maybe on the scene or imminent, and so he would film everything, and I would always climb. I was 3 years into climbing, so everything was really sloppy, and I was yelling because that's what I saw Chris Sharma do, And I'd get to the top, and I'd be embarrassed. I'd be like, "That was really bad. I want to do it again if you're gonna film it." And he would be like, "No, that's what people want to see. They want to see you like screaming and trying really hard and stuff." And actually, his instinct that was a good thing probably had a really good impact on me, because now, as a quote influencer, I have realized like actually people they don't want you to make it look like super easy, even though that's what I want to do internally. Like when you struggle a little bit, people latch onto that. They like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like the real journey rather than just this floaty person sending and then you don't see the process. I think media is quite good for that these days with like showing the process up to it. But it's funny thing with filming as a bit of a technique. I feel like it's an inverted U of usefulness. So at the very beginning, if you get filmed, you probably actually execute a little bit better than if you're not being filmed, you just scrap your way completely. Mm-hmm. So you film yourself, you like start tweaking your body positioning, you kind of execute a bit more, and then you kind of go into show pony territory, which is like trying to be too smooth and if everything's got to be perfect. And I noticed this with some of the comp athletes where they do all these like really tricky kind of like super dynamic, super complicated movements, but then you try and get them kind of scrapping on something in training, and they're so used to having their phones out, someone having their phone out, they almost don't lean in as much. And I think there's that the people I've worked with, a few of them which are naturally quite awkward on camera, have got much better. They're in this nice sweet spot of they film it because it's kind of cool stuff, but fundamentally they're going to scrap the way to the top regardless and then just delete the video. Whilst if you care about it a little bit too much or too little, you're not kind of making the most of it. So it's an interesting tool. I saw Honnold put something up about the other day about filming himself and tweaking body positions, and it's funny, probably the most filmed athlete in the world. You're using it just for yourself. That's the best case, isn't it? Best case scenario.
Even the World Cup athletes that you're talking about, it's funny to think of filming having any effect on them at all, because they're 10 or 20 or 30 times a year, they're climbing in front of 5,000 people and 50 cameras, and it's all being broadcast live around the internet. It's funny to think that anything could pierce that veil. But when you get them in the gym, I guess they're probably just normal people still, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, after every comp, say with like Erin, and I know most of the teams do this, and the Japanese are ridiculous at doing this with their iPads on the front row of the coaching lineup. They film everything, and I think it's that double-edged sword again of like, it's really useful to take that information. The main thing I look for is what was the style, how did you do on it? But until you talk to the athlete and actually understand how they felt on it, people can read a bit too much into it, and they say, you can't do this movement, or you can't do this, let's try and replicate it exactly. And it's is kind of about just taking the little snippets of like the overall picture of that, because it's so random comp climbing. It's just looking at the genre of movement and then focusing in there, and then maybe looking at some like physical specifics. Like I remember sitting in a conversation with a coach going, oh, they can't do this physical movement, they're really technically poor at doing this. And I was like, well, I don't know, when I look like that, it's because I can't hold on to that hold very well. It's like they're having to do that with their shoulder because their fingers aren't strong enough, and then vice versa, it's they're not sucking in because they're used to their fingers feeling fine, but that's making them fall off the next move. So yeah, it's a nice balancing act the whole time. But yeah, every comp athlete, most athletes should just spend a bit of time filming themselves. I actually think it's good for mental health as well, because this is probably a bit of a deep dive into my mental state, but I sometimes, when you climb and you just feel like you weigh about a ton, and you're like, God, I'm such a tight climber. Like my arms always bent. I feel like I always feel like quite heavy in terms of like as a climber. And like, God, I just wish I was smoother. And I actually film myself, and I go, oh, I didn't move too bad actually. I was quite fast, and you actually start point out some of the positives, and it actually gives you a better indication of yourself. Then when you imagine yourself climbing next time, you imagine that kind of climber, what everyone else is telling you look like. So yeah, that's another kind of good use of it for me personally.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I feel like something I really like about where I live, and I moved here to climb hard here because I think it gels really well with my style, is I just can be very close to the wall here. I feel like a gecko a lot of the time. Like the holds are far apart. I have long arms. I have really good skin for the type of rock here and stuff. And so I just feel glued to the wall. But when I climb inside, I feel the opposite thing. Like a lot of the time it's set to be more like kid friendly, which is a good thing, especially because I have a small town gym, so kids are really important to their bottom line. And I can't hold on to the holds. The plastic like doesn't work as well for me. So I just always feel like I'm so far away from the wall when I'm climbing inside. But then when I watch the video, like it doesn't really look that much different than when I climb outside. It's just entirely like a perception thing. I feel like I'm not connecting to it as well. And so that's what I'm really hyper fixated on, but it's actually not that different. It's just a perception, I think. I think that's a huge part of coaching, and why people hire coaches is to kind of double check their own concept of what their rate limiters are. And speaking to what you were saying about movement, it's like you can take a bunch of people and have them work on a move, and some of them will be doing it and they'll be like, oh, it's really like about, I was like trying to extend my hip, or someone else will say like, oh, I just needed to like get a more aggressive grip on that hold, or, and like they might all have totally different kind of ideas of what it is that makes the move work. But when you watch them all do it, it's maybe not even that different sometimes.
Yeah. And it's quite nice when you get to know your athlete, isn't it? And the key cue that would work for them, or where the weaknesses are, the strengths are, and you can kind of, well, you're not going to be able to pull in on this hold anymore, or I know you can't reach that hold, but let's do this instead. Let's tweak your hip. Whenever we flick your hips in a bit more, you always get a bit more distance. So just focus on the hips. And yeah, that's the bit I always really like, and why it's never going to be a robotic game in climbing, because everyone's such different heights and weights and power limits and sort of speed of contraction. So it's endless in terms of those cues that you can give. Same problem, 5 different cues, 5 different methods, and the method might look the same on camera, but the cue is different, and therefore the focus is.
Yeah, it's so funny. You're like, a lot of what you're trying to do as a coach is to like understand the athlete's perspective, so that you can speak to them in a language that they understand, like you're saying about the different cues. But that's such a hard thing to do in life, to understand what someone else is seeing, what someone else is like taking in. That's like a really challenging subject. I feel like this is a minute ago now, but I was going to ask if you've been climbing, I guess, about 20 years, it sounds like, and coaching about 10. How much do you feel like your climbing identity is about your own climbing versus about your coaching? Do you feel like you're mostly a coach?
I think it's waved over the years. I would say I've sacrificed my climbing massively for my career, not just in terms of being busy, but also training with athletes. Like, the years I was training with Toby over the winter, and I would just be destroyed. I couldn't do anything myself. And like the days doing all the filming, like props to everyone who does YouTube, like full on good effort. Like Josh on our team, like they get really tired filming. They didn't warm up properly. They're doing stuff over and over for content, for other people to benefit from it. And coaching is the same. Nowadays, I think I've been quite lucky the last couple of years where it's moved a bit back in that direction of me as a climber, particularly like learning to do more multi-pitch and trad and big walls, like putting more time there. But I think I'm a very career-driven person, or I'm a very curious person, and there's only so much curiosity I can put into my own body before it breaks. So I can apply that brain power easier to other people. Like I know it's probably a roundabout way of saying this really, but I know a lot of climbers that just climb, and if they're not as interested in their career outside of climbing, something totally separate, they've got a lot of brain power that just fixates and it becomes so much pressure, and everything's about performance. And for me, I get to obsess about performance, but I don't have to feel the pressure of that performance a lot of the time. Obviously I really care about my athletes and the way they perform, but it's in their hands. So my obsession with performance has an outlet, which is probably my bigger calling over necessarily just climbing for myself. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason I asked is because I'm trying to answer that question still. But like a lot of the reason that I decided to get into coaching, because I was, I guess I would have been like 30, 33 or 32 when I started seriously considering it, was because I wanted to stay connected to the community. I just felt like I had become this like lone wolf, and because I lived in Bend at the time and I had done a lot of the climbing I wanted to do there. So it was like, go out in the woods, hike around with my dog, find some high ball, put a ton of work into cleaning it, top rope soloing, building a landing. And I'm just by myself for like 8 days, 9 days, 10 days. And then rally all my friends and like bring them out there with pads so I can try to do it. And I was like, well, wait, I'm only climbing with other people like 1 day out of 15 or something like that. What have I done to my climbing career? And at the time with coaching kind of becoming a plausibility online, I was like, well, this is a way that I can use my digital skills, because I have a lot of computer skills, and I can also like stay more deeply connected to the climbing community. And I think at this point I've salvaged a lot of my actual climbing identity, and I actually maybe climb more and harder now than I have at other times in my 30s. But I'm definitely, when I look at the horizon, I feel like my coaching has a way longer run time and a way higher ceiling. Like I don't think I've even come close to tapping into my potential to be a good coach, versus, my climbing, I've definitely tapped into some of my potential. I won't say that the ceiling is like super close, but I'm not sure how much further I can go with the runway that I have left.
What's kind of your ratio of satisfaction from you sending a project versus a client sending a project?
Well, it's like they're different things, because I can have 20 clients all send their project the same week or season or whatever. So there's a force multiplier of empowering other people that's like really, really spectacular. Whereas with my own projects, obviously those are really meaningful in my life, but it's few and far between, because I'm not sure if you feel this in your climbing, but as I get closer to what feels like my genetic potential, and I just am expressing more parts of myself for whatever it is that I have to offer, I feel like I'm less and less satisfied by anything that isn't right there at the edge of what I feel like I can do. So like if I can climb 8B or 8B plus maybe someday, it's less fun to climb 8A or 8A plus, especially because I'm getting older, and those things are still really, really hard. Actually, they still take a huge investment, and I'm like most interested in that 2% or whatever that I can do at the tippy top. Whereas with my clients, I can have somebody come to me who's been climbing for 5 years and they're just trying to climb 7B or 7C or something, and empowering them to do that, it just only takes a few nudges in the right direction. So it's like it's a lot less lift basically to feel the dopamine and serotonin rush of like getting someone to their goals. That might be kind of sad to feel that way. And I'm like, it's easier to help other people reach their goals. I don't want to feel like I'm letting myself down.
You wouldn't have the best coaching business if you only worked with people that would operate at your personal limit. So AB plus Boulder is only.
I don't think
it'd be fun.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in business. I don't think, for starters.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel so far away from my physical potential. I think I adapt really well to training. I think I have a good physical capacity, but I question myself a little bit about this. Of do I have the mental capacity to be an elite athlete, like a truly elite athlete? Because there's like I could just stop trying to work as much now and really commit to that. Obviously, I still need to earn a living, but there's a big spectrum from the amount of hours I'm doing now versus what I could do. And I do think if I was in that position, how much could I actually dig in and just lean into that? Whilst working, I seem to be able to just push and push and push, and I do go through cycles of burnout and stuff, and I wouldn't say I have but I really enjoy it. Not the burnout bits, but the other bits. And it's kind of like I think one of you, we were chatting about questions and stuff in terms of genetic potential, and I don't know whether I have the mental potential to maximize my physical ability. I'm not sure. And by do in terms of, I'm not sure. I've never given myself the opportunity for that. Because it was interesting to your point, I was ticking off my coaching goals. I always set goals in everything. And coaching, I was like, I was amazed to work with the best climber down the wall at first, like the local gym, and then I've been invited to coach on the GB team, and then I've worked with this person. Then I helped Toby go to do his first World Cup win, and I've not done that with a female athlete before. I've never had a huge success with female athletes. And then Erin, she started to win, and I worked with sort of trad climbers, and I keep like going through these things, but
expanding.
And I feel like I'm in a position now where I feel like, I could hang my hat a little bit on my coaching. But every time a new athlete comes along who I'm really curious about, and I'm like, I think I can help. I'm like, no, you should spend a bit more time on your own climbing. And I'm like, but I could really help them. Like, I kind of want to prove the theory works. So yeah, maybe I'm avoiding the true battle in my own climbing. I don't know.
Maybe you have a really good predisposition for the mental side of coaching. Maybe that's just something that you're like more passionate about, and maybe you're only more passionate about that right now. That's the cool thing about climbing. Like, there's kind of an expiration date for certain types of bouldering and some of the comp stuff. You probably won't be training with the future Toby in 20 years. I think that would be a bad idea, maybe physically, but like for a lot of this stuff, there's tons of time to reach your goals. That's part of what makes it so cool. I don't think we give enough credence to the mental side of genetics and genetic predisposition. It's like hugely important. No,
not at all. I mean, I would say I've only met 4 people that I genuinely, it doesn't mean there's not more that I've met, but the 4 people I recognize as physically, genetically gifted. And usually the reason I've spotted that is either they started climbing really late and their fingers were extremely strong straight away. So 2 climbers that stand out there is David Fitzgerald, Jack Palmieri. They both had exceptionally strong fingers. They didn't have any training during those teenage years, those formative years where they might have laid down some of that foundations. And then other people like Alex Puccio, Will Bosey, whose family members seem to be, they look like athletes. They are strong as athletes, but they don't train the same way. Like I think Will's dad can hang a 2000 middle edge or something one arm. Doesn't really climb anyone.
That's
and I think and they still have to put the work in. But I've met so many people that are, I don't know, you'd put them like in terms of focus, like it's a huge spectrum, isn't there, in terms of mental capacities, ADHD, autism, everything. But that is just it's not lines in the sand, it's just a spectrum. And I've met so many of the best athletes that have this hyper focus that is not normal compared to, I'm not saying quote unquote normal, it's not like me. And you're like, well, is that a genetic gift? Have they facilitated that in their growing up? I think a lot of it is genetic when I've met their parents, spend time with them. And I actually think that is a bigger indicator of performance than anything physical, at least in climbing at the moment. I think you can be genetically ungifted in climbing. Those people that are naturally absolute massive legs, or they just, I don't know, can't even think of too many reasons why you wouldn't be. You might just not have the right shape that is completely useful for every style of climbing that you want to do, like weightlifting, like every other sport. But there's a lot of people that are mentally not gifted to be able to perform at their best and have that obsessive nature or ability to cope with failure and all of those other good things.
I think the opposite archetype of the Will Bosey's dad hanging from a middle edge, one-armed, the opposite of that definitely exists. I've worked with those people where it's just like you control the volume, you try to be really smart about the training, dose everything out, and they follow it all to a T, and they still get a finger injury, and it's like devastating, but that's the reality. And I really try to come to it from a perspective of like what matters most is getting all these things, getting a view of these things in your head in terms of like what do you have in your corner, what's working for you, where are you really good and where are you really poor. Like I have good finger genetics, but as far as the rest of my body, like I have some kind of like collagen subtype disorder or something, because I'm very flexible and mobile to the point that I can just injure myself like immediately, like on command, basically. And that's not a great trait for a high level climber, but I think I have some other things that I can offset it. Like I'm very patient. I have really good emotional regulation. You know, I don't just hammer the problems or the roots like relentlessly, or at least I don't as much as I used to when I was younger. You know, I've adapted to my physical deficits in a meaningful way. And I think that probably is more what determines your potential, is like your ability to cope with whatever it is that you have or don't have. And the people who are performing at the peak probably have high scores in many of these different things, but they all have weak points too. Most of them, I would guess. They've just found ways to work around them.
Yeah, and usually it's some kind of just very normal thing in terms of like social abilities in a crowd or something like that, and that's why they go and work really hard on their own. I mean, a good example there is my wife Maddie and Tom, in terms of if you were to take a lineup of random people and test them in the way that we test climbers, like Tom has skin like a fish, just wet, and then his hands are kind of like I don't know, like you see him use them in the crack, it's kind of like an octopus where it'll just completely collapse down, which does work really well in cracks actually, in hand jams. But in terms of gripping onto holds, there's no genetic predisposition there to hold force, but he's got that mental element which allows him to obsess and just to be completely driven by something and fight through pain and all of that. And then my wife Maddie, she works so hard to get stronger fingers, and they do get stronger, but it takes so much effort. I come back from a trad trip and my fingers are stronger, mostly because I'm over gripping the whole time. But she's like, I'll come back and I'll just hang on a fingerboard 2 sessions back to max, and maybe I could push the ceiling higher, but hers takes so long to get strong. But she's flexible, her body's really strong. She just seems to be able to climb. Well, she climbs so well. And again, I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, she was up at Sais once, and a bunch of girls came over to her. This is probably about 15 years ago, so you can kind of tell the type of conversations going on. But these girls came over to her and said, "Oh, what sport do you do?" And they're like, "Oh, we were trying to guess if you're a cyclist or a runner or something," because she's got like I think she's got great legs, but then she's climbed 8C, she's climbed loads of E9, she's one of the best climbers in the UK, like female climbers, and it's she could moan all day if she wanted to about having poor fingers and not having the genetics, but at the end of the day she's just climbed harder than 99.9% of people out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's that understanding of like what you can do with what you got. And I think 15 years ago that conversation makes sense. If I heard that conversation now, I think I'd have a hard time not getting involved in it, because I think having strong legs is just a good thing in climbing, as long as you understand how to keep them on. Basically, as soon as you can't keep them on, it's really a problem when they're super heavy. But the rest of the time, I think having strong legs is great. I've put on like maybe 10 to 12 pounds, or like 5-6 kilos of weight almost entirely, I think, in my lower body in the last like few years. And I haven't noticed anything except for good things in my climbing. I mean, I can't tell you a single bad thing that's happened in my climbing as a result of having heavier legs.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Dave Mason's done the same. He had a knee injury skiing, put loads of weight on his hamstrings, and just seemed to get better. And the amount of climbers, actually this is probably an age thing as well, but so many of the friends that I know that have tiny legs, they're all hitting this point in their 30s, and it's not even, it's probably like 32 onwards. They start complaining about their knees. There's like, they've had a hamstring tweak. There's always like little problems, and they always seem like not a big deal because it's not a finger, but those things start adding up pretty badly. And when you have a bad knee injury, it's so much worse than a finger injury for normal life. And again, I've got pretty big legs, and they've always been pretty strong. And I've had the odd knee tweak because I've gotten something so hard for me that my legs are doing all the work. And I'm still like pretty grateful for the amount of work they did on that climb. But generally speaking, I never have any problems. So I think it's, like you say, would you rather put a bit of muscle on, learn to climb slightly different, not have to take any time off? Or would you try and get as skinny legs as possible, have a knee problem, twist it, drop kneeing or something, and then have to have surgery or have time off to recover, which tends to be quite hard to recover in those tendons in your knee. Just from blood flow and all the other reasons why it's hard to recover, because you're just on them day in, day out.
Yeah. And like you said, it's those injuries that start to affect your real life. Then you're really having to do the calculus of like, how much of my happiness is worth giving up to try to get, because most of the time we're talking about climbing, some tiny notch harder, or just climbing a harder version of a grade we've already climbed or something like that. It's not like revolutionary. You can't take it to the bank. It's not even like people who are into pickleball when they're 40 years old, where they're like going to win the regional championship or whatever, and that gets written down on a website or a sheet somewhere or something like that. Most of this stuff is like, I'm still trying to climb grades that I thought were cool 15 years ago. I'm not trying to climb grades that anybody else thinks are cool now.
Here's a controversial question for you, totally off topic, but
okay.
The grades that you're not climbing at your best, say it's not like a new grade for you. It's not like a flash of the hardest grade. It's just a random climb. Say your t-shirt dabs or something like that. Where it's kind of like one of those things everyone's getting really strict about now in terms of the ascent. How strict are you about stuff that doesn't matter too much to you?
For me personally, I mean, I think a t-shirt dab is pretty. I would only care about a t-shirt dab if it was something that really mattered to me. But there's my brain has like a logical fault there, because I can't imagine something feeling really important to me and also being something where my t-shirt could dab at the same time. Like, if it's so close to the ground that my t-shirt can dab, it's almost by definition not going to be that important.
That's location privilege there. You need to come climb into the holes in the UK and do some grotty limestone. Yeah,
I'm showing my American chauvinism, I guess. I've talked about this before somewhere else, but I have a huge affinity for the UK bouldering scene, because I started climbing in Oregon, which is like super dank and wet and tons of climbing out of caves and moss everywhere, and the seasons suck. It's either like way too hot or it's just wet all the time. That's where I did all my formative climbing. So when I watch like the wedge, YouTube channel, I'm like, wow, this looks just like home. Like, I can't wait to visit there someday. And everybody's like I'm always telling my wife, like, yeah, we should go there and go climbing. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not going there.
Well, you're very welcome here. You've got a place to stay if you want to come. Actually, you've met Peter Klimek, haven't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So he just left mine yesterday. He's just been here for the week, and he is so funny. He's showing me the area that he's developing. I think you went to recently with all the beautiful granite boulders, and I've taken him to the local climbing, and like Peter's a pretty stacked dude. He's a muscly guy. He loves compression boulders, and where I took him is effectively dead hanging, but you move upwards slightly, and then you match a 10 mil hold and you drop off, and I think he got his first jamming blister because you have to jam this hold at the bottom to slightly lift your bum off the ground, not too high though because there's a roof above you, to reach to the end of the roof to start grabbing more crimps. And I did catch myself because this is our local crag. It's like brilliant. It was good scenes, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is not the epitome of climbing, is it?" And he was showing me these like glorious holds that he's been on, and it showed me as well the style again. It's just like, he's used to using his whole body to compress and to hook on, and the style here is if you can't hang it, you can't climb it.
Real
tic-tac.
I think of the word ratty, which I only know from like Careless Talk and other British.
Ratting.
Yeah, I have the same sort of style as Peter, where it's like the big holds far apart, lots of heel hooks, body tension, a lot of body power. But yeah, just going straight up on a line of like small micro edges in a really steep wall, that's super challenging. I've climbed in like Colorado and places like that where that's what I had to do. It would take me more than a week to adapt to that style. I think it's not something that comes very naturally.
Yeah, me and my wife Maddie, I think it really doesn't suit us in terms of the style we like to climb. Like we love granite, and granite multi-pitch is the technical element of it in particular. But it's funny, like for her, it's been the last year. She's really lent into the climbing around here, and she's always wanted an affinity to where she lives. And the Peak District, it's never really been that, because it's got a certain kind of scene and certain style of climbing, and she's just really lent into it and not focused on just trying to push hard, but ticking off loads more climbs in this big pyramid. And you suddenly start building a bit more rapport with it. You get to see the style changes, and just regular ticking, I think is massive. And I used to have such an affinity to around here, and then went through a phase of kind of losing that love for it because I was constantly trying to climb hard. And for me, it's like, I think it's totally fine to try and change your weight for a period of time to try and send, but almost like felt too much of a difference by doing that. So then kind of fell out of love with doing that. Well, it's not what my values are. And actually just ticking regularly is such a crucial thing for people to do. Like there's some people that maybe go around and don't push themselves to the max, and I think that's also useful. But I think if anyone's kind of like losing motivation or feeling like they're not able to put down what they're doing in training, just look at the pyramid, just go and have fun, pick some classics, pleasure pointing. If you're on a rope, it's like red point, like perfectly red point, something you guarantee you'll probably do. I say guarantee probably, but most likely you're going to do. And the same with like bouldering, is go and treat it like an absolute max boulder, tactics, everything. Take all your best game, send it, and you feel so good about yourself, and you start loving the day. Then do it again and again and again, and then you'll be ready for a project again.
That's such good advice. It's crazy that sounds like it's a unique message in 2025, because I would think that 10 plus years ago that was sort of the obvious thing to do, was like you learn the whole crag. And I've been climbing here for almost since I started climbing, and like I remember days of going to the bigger bouldering crags here and just cruising around with a friend in a small pad, and you get 2 tries at every boulder, and So like you would try each boulder 2 times. And if you could do all the boulders on the circuit 2 out of 2 times, that was like a really good day. So there's like lots of boulders in that main area that I've climbed like hundreds and hundreds of times because that was just part of what we did. And now I coach so many people from like Seattle, the closest big city. And I think a lot of people come out and just sort of try the one that they want to do, and they'll spend 6 hours on it that day. And they walk by 25 other things to get to the one that they want to do. And I'm not trying to put a value judgment against that, but it is interesting. I think I think I have a hard time not blaming social media and the explosion of the size of the climbing community for that shift. Because when I was circuiting things with my friends 15-ish years ago, that's kind of what everyone was doing. And now these people who are just trying one boulder when they come out for the weekend, that's kind of what everyone's doing. So I don't think it's like something's wrong with anybody's character. It's just sort of like the norm has shifted under our feet a little bit. And I guess one other piece of evidence there that's interesting is like when I work with people, I'll often recommend a session I call Project Plus One session, which is like you go out, you're going to try your project, but before you go to your project or after you go to your project, you have to send one new boulder. It's like to me, the lowest imaginable like bar for like doing some new mileage. And it's really interesting to me. I basically get 2 types of responses to that session. Either it works really well for them and they have a blast and they start sending a lot more stuff in that season, or they can't get themselves to do it. I've never had anybody successfully do it and say it was a bad use of their time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I love that idea. I think that's great. It's like you say as well, it kind of, projecting takes self-efficacy. You have to have the confidence to believe that you're going to do something, or believe in the fact that you're enjoying that process. And you build self-efficacy by doing stuff and by having evidence of that. And I think like perfect, like just do one other climb. You're guaranteed to feel good. And if you're not willing to go on that, either you've got a massive fear of failure, or you're so convinced that any other time away from that project is wasted energy, which, I think both of us probably can just agree that's not true. We don't have to sort of bow down to that. I actually have I started setting up personal benchmarks for me for like on certain time things, which it's a really nice challenge. So, like the last few years I've started, picking up sort of the odd project that's a bit harder for me again, bouldering. I've not really bouldered much for a while, or like at least projecting, but there's a couple which have really stood out. So I think generally speaking, like a boulder project for me is more like 8A plus, 8B, and then the odd 8B plus I've started trying. But I've said to myself, I think it was 5 years ago, I want to do an 8A every year. And like one of the years I did it on December 31st, and it was like I just had to get one in, and it was so satisfying. And I was like, cool, I'm reaching this level. And all that year I was trad climbing and multi-pitching and doing other things, and I just had this thing at the back of my head was, oh, you just need to go and find like a cool 8A, you should do that. And it's just this sub max level. And I've done the same with like doing certain routes or something. Like I want to climb a certain route grade again, and I was like, oh, cool, you have to do this, and this before you're allowed to get on that. And every time I tick it off, it makes me feel so much better. So like one of my friends, he was asking me what to do recently in terms of his climbing, and he's someone whose motivation ebbs and cycles, and I think he really struggles with getting niggles and tweaks, and he wants to climb sort of 70 plus. So we just set up a sevens goal, like a certain amount of sevens, and it did actually get to the point of I was like, oh, are you going to get on this route? We've come all the way here to try this 7C plus. And he was like, I kind of want to do those two, that 7A and 7B, because then I'm like one step closer. And I was like, yeah, sick, whatever. Let's do them, and then you can try the hard one. So I think this is such a game that we don't have to just play the one game of who climbs the hardest. It's who does, like, you can do anything you want, really.
Well, you're sort of interpolating between, I have this like system in my head of the 3 things that people climb for are performance, progression, or fulfillment. And it's always a mix of all of them. It's never like only purely one, although you'll see people who are just purely trying to do one or only really interested in one. And that setting a goal that's very achievable, but it is loosely time based. You know, you're going to have to like work for it, but you're not going to have to work for it so hard. I think that's just like nicely right in the middle of those, where it's like, I'm going to have to kind of have my shit together, but also I can spend a lot of the year doing other stuff, and I don't necessarily have to train like a demon in order to accomplish this thing. I think that's like such a sustainable and just pleasant place to be in your climbing, because it's not as driven for sure as just trying to climb the hardest thing you can, or the very number-based version of the same thing, which I've done to myself a bunch of times. I'm going to try to climb, you know, I climbed 10 7C plus last year, so I'm going to try to climb 12 7C plus this year, or I'm going to try to climb 10 8As this year. I've done that. I did that too much back in the day, and you burn out really fast doing that kind of thing. But, you know, just trying to maintain the same grade that's sort of a good, I think of that as like regression to the mean type grade. Like it's always a baseline you can come back to. I think that's super valuable. Like my limit for flashing has been like 7C plus. That's like the hardest thing I've ever flashed. I may never flash one again, but any year that I can flash a 7C, I feel pretty good. It's not like a goal, but definitely every time I'm walking up to a new 7C that I've never tried, I'm kind of like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to like get the flash for the year. And then I know I'm like still at my baseline, you know, I haven't like let it slide.
I think when it's not your specific target, the avoidance of regression is progression. Is the way I always say it. It's like you with flashing and me with bouldering in my multi-pitch phase. It's like if I'm not regressing, I'm progressing, because at the end of the day, I'm able to pull this off when I'm doing something else. And I quite like that. Like just keep the floor up, and then you can try and get to the ceiling at another point. But as long as your floor is quite high, it's just like you say, it's another way of doing it, and it's kind of in that middle of so many different areas. But I mean, it also, I don't know if you're the same, but when you do that, you probably end up going to achieve your goal in the thing you really care about as well. Because if you're flashing in 7C, it means you're probably close to kind of your top end generally, or you know you're on relatively good form. So then if you want to try harder, you might be in a better headspace to do that. For me, the reason why I did that with bouldering was I know I'll come back to it, and I know I want to try hard routes and all these other things. So if I know I can boulder Fonte, then I can probably do all the moves on the level of climbing that I want to do. So it's like I'm just checking in with that.
Bouldering feels like my general bouldering shape to climb outside feels like that's the base that underpins anything else that I really want to achieve. And I don't think I'm as much of an all-arounder as you. I barely tried climb. I definitely haven't done any granite big walls, anything that I would call a big wall. But for sure, if I have, you know, higher end bouldering goals or varied bouldering goals in terms of the type of terrain, or if I have sport climbs that I want to do, you know, or if it's a volume oriented goal, or I'm going on a trip, just that general bouldering strength has always felt like the most important thing that I can have. It's also maybe for me the easiest thing to hold on to. I think that I'm pretty naturally powerful and fairly light, so I think bouldering like fits me pretty well. But maybe this comes back to the rate limiter thing that we kind of started out talking about. Maybe this is like my perspective, because I'm not as physically gifted. I don't respond to training super well. And so I think it's always been really important to me to perform outside relatively regularly as like a mental confidence boost as well, to just remember what it feels like to try to get into the mind frame to like try really hard, and to not lose the like tactical edge and the like mental edge. Because I think if I lose those things, I'll be like us looking in the HD video and seeing all the wrinkles on our face. I'll be like, oh shit, where did all my power and strength go? Like, I thought that I was doing well. And the opportunity cost for trying to project super hard is just so high for me these days. Like if I'm going to go try AB or AB plus, I'm going to need several days off, and I can't really train very hard in those days. And so you stack up a bunch of those days in the season, and it's like, whoa, where did 3 months go? It's gone. You know, it just evaporates.
Yeah, and I think you need several years at the same level to have the confidence to just dip in and out and get to that level again. And I would say the athletes I work with, and there's so many of them which it's just amazing how, and I've just started working with someone who went to the recent Olympics, and we're sort of working on her training and her mental state. And, you know, for her, if she's not climbing well in the local walls or in Innsbruck or whatever in the weeks before the comps, that's massive. So she's got loads of evidence of her ability to perform, but fundamentally you're still trying to perform at your best, and you're trying to perform at a certain level that she's aiming for because she's trying to do better. So if she's not seeing that in training, it doesn't translate. Whilst other people I've worked with, James Pearson's a really good example. He's just performed at the same level, high level for such a long time. Like, he's just got this ability to be like, yeah, climb AB+, climb 8C. And it's like, well, you've not been bouldering much, James. You've just been building. Like, you're a full-time builder, effectively, like doing your house up. And, he can just pull it off. But he's got so much of that evidence to say that is possible. I mean, this is someone who almost did off the wagon before Sharma back in the day and fell off the last hold. And so he's got this evidence of, I can just keep dipping in and out and get there. Whilst I think unless you've got that evidence, you kind of need that ramp up, and you need all the things, the confidence boosters. You need your superpowers, like for you tactically, technically, to be on point. And then it brings up all the things that you naturally feel are weaker. Like for me, I do feel stronger than I do feel fit. And whenever I see someone like me, I always make sure they stay strong, even if I know that is not the thing that's going to hold them back. Because if they're warming up and they feel crap on the fingerboard, on their warm-up fingerboard, or on the warm-up climb because it's a little bit fingery, it doesn't matter how much fitter they get, they're not going to like climb as well. They're going to over grip because they think they're going to come off. So whatever that superpower is, you need to really like tune in on that before you achieve the goal, just to believe that the actual things that are weaknesses are going to carry through.
I think that's brilliant. This is like, what is the source of your confidence, and how can you empower that and not like accidentally kind of let it slip and cause this like cascade basically where you lose other aspects of performance because you don't feel confident.
Yeah, and you've highlighted yours. I'm sure you have like you kind of know that tick in your head of like, if I send, I don't know, so many climbs before, I know I'm on point. Or if I send a certain grade relatively quickly, and you kind of know that feeling when it switches, going, cool, everything's there. And for other people, like coming back to this other athlete is, and I'm talking to Erin about this at the moment, actually. It's a good example midway through the season, because obviously we're trying to avoid her declining throughout a very fatiguing season, is dead hanging one arm on a Beastmaker 2000 edge. That is, people can talk all they want about the usefulness of metrics. Like, we can argue about that till the cows come home. If that athlete feels good because they can walk up to it and do that, then that means more than anything else in terms of like how much weight they are, how much weight they're adding, like how often they can do it, how long they can do it. If they can just walk up, pull their feet off the ground, they're like, sweet, yeah, I'm feeling quite good today. That's massive. And everyone has a tick like that, and it's just like locking in what your tick is. And I think that's one of the first things I kind of do as a coach, is like, what's the thing that's going to switch them on? That's even if the training's not gone very well, as long as I tick this one thing, it's at least going to get them halfway there to believing in themselves. And the more time we can kind of clock in with that, the better.
And what are the things that are going to switch them off, and how do we try to control those variables? Because like coaching, I mostly coach people who want to climb outside, and so it's always an uncontrolled environment in terms of conditions and other people. And so like, if somebody, like a good example would be if somebody is always using headphones when they're climbing in a crowd in order to like drown out the crowd sound, I think that's a good like low friction solution to that problem. Like, you just don't have to deal with the crowd. But if your headphones run out of battery, or if you forget them one day, or if there's some safety reason that you can't wear your headphones while you're climbing, like you need to hear your spotter or whatever, like then suddenly you have no solution to that problem. And so it's like, do you try to come up with a high friction solution, like learning how to climb around bigger crowds, or do you just have to pick projects that are never going to be where other people are? I mean, it becomes like that, I guess this is always my solution, is like, how do we go around the problem as much as possible? But I think it's interesting to think about like what is going to build confidence in that athlete and get them to that kind of performance headspace. I've thought a lot about I want to take the Tindeck app and run a study where I can control someone's Tindeck app like remotely. So you can say like, if the conditions are good and they're going to their project that day and I think that they could have a good day, I want to be able to just like boost the numbers that they see on their Tindeck by like 10% or what, and they'll be like, whoa, I set a PB. I'm going to do great on my project today, and see if that increases their chances of sending. Because the number of times when I have somebody doing like overcoming style on a Tindeck at the Crag, that they set a PB the day that they send their project, it's like very common, you know, versus I don't hear as much that like the numbers were terrible and they sent their project, even though I know that can happen too.
I think, who did I interview not that long ago who was like that? They were like, it made no, maybe it's a British thing of like, you know, I know Dave Mack's really into this like negative attitude, be like, oh, it's never going to work out, take all the pressure off, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's going to be a terrible day. And it's a funny one with like the crowd thing. I think that's so hard. Because I guess coming back to your method, obviously going around it, I always guess my method is always just assume today's not going to be the day, and you just go for it anyway. And you're like, as long as the focus is like kind of enjoy it for what it is, but just know you're going to kind of have a bit of a hard time. Maybe moan about it to the person you're closest to, but don't go on about it to the whole crowd, because that is annoying. But you've got to, you kind of like take it for what it is. It's funny actually, we had this at our Lattice party recently. We were playing like these games. It was like a competitive game. It was just like throwing beanbags into this, like the wooden holes. I can't remember the name of it. Cornhole. And it was crazy. I am very, very competitive person, and this is probably why I wouldn't be a great athlete, but like my hand was shaking because I had so much adrenaline. First round, I absolutely smashed it. Really sagged. Next round, I was against Tom's daughter, and she's really good at it. And it's like I lost, and I'll kill myself for that for the rest of the time. But I couldn't believe like how much adrenaline I had through me just with my own team, people I stand up in front of and talk all the time. And it's quite nice knowing that, like when I go to the Crag, if there's a big crowd or something, I just know I'm going to have a hard time. And you just go, cool, maybe there'll be a break and everyone will start looking away or something, and I'll get it sent. But the rest of the time, I'm just like, cool, I've got to lean into this new environment, make the most of it, and then see what happens. And I probably won't climb very well, but there's no pressure because I know I'm not going to climb as well. And I think unless you really put in the time, which I think is worth it if you've got the mental space, it's going to be a big thing to change, like a major part of your personality or your mindset. I know like Hazel Finley and Angus are great friends of mine, and they do such a good job with people. And Flo Tilley on our team at Lattice, like she works so much with people on their values. Like we all do it as coaches, but like Flo in particular is so good at drilling down with people and working on their pre-climb rituals and the way that they build into the reasons why they're at the Crag and actually making the most of it. And I can see her just switching on now at the Crag because she's applying everything she's learnt. I think that sort of time is so valuable. But if you don't have the sort of headspace to work on it, then just find the most positive solution in the moment.
Yeah. One tool that I have learned that has been useful for me, like you were kind of talking about knowing in your own mind what you're up against in the environment and being like, okay, this isn't like the great environment for me to perform at my limit, so I'm going to try to work around that by bringing this different headspace to it or bringing this different mindset to it. But even that is like a level of awareness. Like I think a lot of people are at the level of awareness where they don't even recognize yet that it's not a good performance environment, right? And so it's almost like that is the first step, is just knowing your own mind and noticing the way that things feel and noticing when you perform well and you don't. But something that I've noticed that I do, and I'm only now really becoming aware of this, is like there are just certain climbers who I climb better around. And I have always naturally latched onto those people because I get good results around those people. But now I'm learning how to take control of that process a little bit and realize like why I'm doing it and why certain people seem to have like better energy or whatever. And then I can like create better results in the future by empowering these relationships earlier on.
Did they agree to climb with you? You follow them around and go, I'm really sorry, but you're my lucky charm. Sorry, what was your name again?
It sounds a little bit manipulative when I say it out loud, but like we're all doing those things all the time. It's just a question of like how aware of the reasons for it you are, And I guess if you take the inverse example, it would be really obvious that it's not manipulative. If you climb really poorly around somebody, you definitely are not going to want to be climbing around them. No one would consider that to be manipulative.
It's always bad though, isn't it? If you've got someone who really likes climbing with you and you just don't perform well with them.
Well, there's a time and a place, It's like that's the person to go build your base with, and you might be falling off of some 7As or something, but as long as you can have a good attitude about it, it can still be productive.
What makes the people that you climb well around with impactful for you? Like what's the traits? What's their mannerisms and behaviors doing?
So I was thinking about this the other day because I just climbed with someone who I know around here. He's a bit of a local legend, but I had never actually climbed with him until the last couple months. And we went out climbing and went to this area that it's a low water area. So right now the river is really low here, so you can kind of cross the river in different places and climb some boulders that are in the middle of the river and stuff. And there's not that many developed problems on the boulders that we went to. So there's like 4 or 5 problems in the guidebook or something, but there's obviously like 20 problems. And we just both got there and put our stuff down. It was really hot. It was too hot to really start climbing. We both just got brushes out and started brushing like warm-ups. And we didn't even talk about it or anything. It was just what we both started doing. And it's like there was a kinship there, like an appreciation of nature, but also like we must sort of do this for the same reasons, and we must sort of have some of the same perspective for it, even though we don't really climb at the same grade or anything like that. And just from that moment, I was like, oh, this is going to be like a productive climbing session for sure, even though it was like 30 degrees or something when we got to the boulder. But yeah, it could be something as simple as that. And I think for a lot of people, it's also like probably more mechanical things like how people spot, how people belay, stuff like that. Obviously, the belaying is like hugely influential to your success as a sport climber.
Yeah. It's quite funny, actually. One of the people I climb pretty well with him. He's like a really good mate. He's actually the head coach at work, Ollie. I wouldn't say he's a terrible belayer. He did almost drop me yesterday. But it's funny because I really struggle with my head on a rope. And I spend time every year having to overcome fear of falling again. And like this recent trip to America, I had quite a hard time with it. And every time I go out with him, because we're having such a good time, I've taken some quite bad falls, which I would say are slightly belay orientated, and it just doesn't even bother me at all. And I think that's just because his vibe is chill and we're having a good time, we're having a laugh the whole time, there's no pressure. There's like a bit of competitive, I want to burn you off, but that really healthy level. And he always burns me off, so it's kind of all right for him. So yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? It's even like, even with those other things, if the vibe is right, it goes such a long way. Yeah, for sure. I definitely empathise with that viewpoint of partnerships. I mean, it's massive.
Few times I've tried to sport climb a whole bunch and gotten it really dialed and been in red point mode, going with the same partner week in, week out, falling, inching my way up the route. And then I've gone with a new partner and like sent on my first try. And I've never taken a fall with that person. And I've wondered if that's because there's some deep part of my body that's like, actually might be in danger.
I must not fall. It's like trad climbing in the old days.
Yeah. Leader never falls. Yeah. How often do you switch between the disciplines? Because it sounds like you kind of bounce around quite a lot.
Probably too much. I would say second to work. This is why I've not reached my potential in climbing. He's definitely frustrated me at times. So I would say maybe in the last 5 years, because me and Maddie have been together for I should probably know the details of this, but I don't know, 5 years, 4 years,
Edit
5
that
years.
out.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's a fantastic trad climber, like very, very bold trad climber as well. She doesn't think she's bold, but I've seen the gear she's willing to sit on, and it's horrible to be laying under her, particularly when you care about her so much. And so I would say we trad climbed, then as soon as we weren't on a trip, I would boulder and then go into a sport phase when the conditions are quite good, but sport climbing is a bit harder for me to organise around work. Mm-hmm. So maybe I do everything every year. And I would say the longest I do one thing focused for. I never do just do one thing. So the moment I was sport climbing this week, I've been trying like some local climbs, but I bouldered 3 times last week when Peter was over. So I'll boulder and sport climb interchangeably. And then trad climbing's just been on trips in the last few years, but I do maybe 2-3 trips of multi-pitch or trad climbs a year. So yeah, I'd say for me the bigger issue with switching disciplines these days is, like many people, and I'm sure a lot of people can't believe this in terms of working and climbing, but struggling for time to train and climb, is like Kyrgyzstan last year. I went for 4.5 weeks in the summer, and we were having, like, there was a big thing at work going on, and I pretty much just did bouldering on my 8-foot board in the garden for a couple of months before that, and then did some cycling on a turbo trainer in my house. And that was everything I did leading up to it. And then it was big granite, big walls, multi-pitching. And then I've been to America the start of this year for 4 weeks. Again, trad climbing, multi-pitch. And I just went on the grit maybe once a week, and then did some weights over the winter. And I was just like, cool, I've just got to turn up and try and perform. So I think what I used to do is have a bit more of a switch over in consistency, whilst these days it's very trip focused for trad and multi-pitch, and then a local whatever I can get out. But I'm hoping I would never ever recommend that. You can do it and it's absolutely fine, but I think I'd be better off having reeled it in a little bit and not trying to push my comfort zone on these trips quite as much, and then trying to just have a bit more consistency. I don't like to be too stagnant. I just can't do one thing, but recently I've definitely switched too frequently to really not just perform, but to enjoy it to the max because of that switch over and adaptation in the first few weeks.
I mean, going back to my like 3 sort of pole stars, I feel like as long as your main goal is to be fulfilled, you don't really have to be prepared for a trip. As long as you're going into it knowing you're going to be super scared and really, really tired hauling stuff up a big wall, but that's like what you want to be doing, I think that's fine. You're going to avoid a lot of the suffering. But as soon as you're like going on the trip and you want to hit your PB or something like that and you don't prepare for it super well, then yeah, you're going to wind up feeling bad for yourself.
Yeah, it was interesting on this trip to America, and I think to your point earlier about showing the hard times and how much effort you put in. I had a really good trip. I was just away with Maddie, but she's climbed El Cap 3 times. 3 or 4 times, like different free routes, and she's freed several routes up there, and so I've never been to Yosemite, and I was like, cool, I want to go on El Cap. That's a big thing we want to do as a partnership. And unfortunately the weather wasn't fantastic when we first arrived, so we went to Red Rocks, then went to Sedona, which was great, and we were having this, but in the back of my head I was just thinking, El Cap. If I'm feeling like this on this, how am I going to feel on El Cap? If I felt like this on this, how am I going to feel on El Cap? I got so much in my own head about that big goal. When we arrived, there was a really bad weather window, and then there was like a 6-day gap, and we pretty much went up free blast because there was a gap in the groups. Then we walked in the next day with the haul stuff to haul. Instead of hauling and then going up free blast, we did it the other way around to try and get this gap. We're in there 6:30 in the morning. There were 6 groups in front of us, all going back to back to back. And I was just sitting under there going, I've been thinking about this for so long. I've been stressing about it all trip. And if I think about one of the biggest values for me in climbing is I hate being in a crowd, and I never want to share a multi-pitch with loads of people. Mm-hmm. And it was a really hard moment, actually, just sitting under the crag, just sitting on the haul bags going, there's not one part of me wants to be up there with that many people rushing because the next weather window is coming, bad weather system was coming in. And we literally walked straight off, went to Fifi Buttress on the other side of the valley, spent 2 days up there, had an absolute great time, didn't share the route at all, tried something way harder, then went over to, I think it was Lost Brothers Tower or something, same thing again. And by the time we got down from doing those two things, the storm had rolled in, and the group that were in front of us on Golden Gate, which was the plan, had to sit out this storm in a fly for 2-3 days. And we didn't have a fly, so that was the other reason why we kind of decided not to do it. And it just made me realise, like, I think if I'd better prepared for the trip, I would have just zoned in on that and thought way more about the logistics and being able to climb way faster and thinking about, like, how to actually perform on that zone. But I didn't have that capacity before the trip. So just being willing to adapt and just take what came and keep, like you say, come back to that fulfillment, those values of why am I climbing. I ended up having an amazing time, and I suddenly realised Yosemite is an absolute playground. It's brilliant. What a place. And like, I want to go back next year and the year after. And I think if I'd forced myself into that in an unprepared state, in a not ideal scenario, I'm pretty certain we would have had to bail because of the weather, and I probably wouldn't ever want to go back.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Don't let the ego get in the way. But if you don't prepare, don't force yourself into something.
Yeah, I think this is one of the hardest aspects of coaching remotely and coaching people who climb outside remotely, because the lesson that you just explained is obviously really important for you and really pivotal for you, but it's so hard to capture that in like a succinct thing that other people will be able to relate to really strongly. I mean, just the pressure of coming, as someone who lives in America and knows the size and scale of it and how much climbing there is to do, because I've been climbing here my whole climbing life, and I've barely scratched the surface of any of it. So it just seems like a ludicrous amount of pressure to be like, I'm going to go over to America and like do a bunch of climbing I'm proud of. It's like, oh yeah, well, what about the weather and the fact that there's thousands of other people who are trying to do the same thing as you, you know? That's a ton of pressure to put yourself under.
What do you do with because I very much don't think you have to be a good climber to be a great coach. And I don't think you have to do everything to be a great coach, but the more experienced I get at experiences, the better. Like the failures, the bad trips, the weather trips, all of those things, and talking to friends that help. Like, what do you think is the biggest obstacle for you in terms of like that relatability in remote coaching, and what's kind of like one of the best things for you? Like, how do you connect with people in those scenarios remotely?
It's really challenging. I think the biggest thing is to create trust and to create a bond with the climber, because if they trust you and they'll talk to you about their goals and they'll talk to you about what actually went wrong, it can be a lot easier to like basically get them to solve their own problem. I mean, that's a lot of coaching, as you know, is just like getting in their head and helping them figure it out for themselves. And if there's no trust, or if there's no solid bond, you'll never pierce that veil, basically. And so I think one of the most challenging things for me with coaching is time is really, really important for developing that trust. And I think influencer is a little bit of a dirty word, but one big benefit that I've gotten from being an independent entity and trying to put content on the internet, on my blog and on my Instagram, my YouTube, my Patreon, all that stuff, is like, I try to really be transparent about who I am on there and how I'm solving problems in my own climbing and how I think about my own values and stuff, so that by the time somebody chooses to work with me, I've at least reached out as far as I can from my side to try to like create some of that bond. And so that I try to like make the lift a little bit easier for them in terms of connecting to me from the other way, because almost all the time the plans are 8 or 12 weeks or something like that, right? And if you're trying to form a tight bond with somebody and help them solve like what could be deeply emotional or self-identity rooted type problems, 8 weeks is a really short timeline to try to create that kind of trust with somebody. So if they can learn something about the way I think about it, and they can take stuff away from my content, first of all, I'm providing value. And in that sense, I don't think influencer is a bad word anymore, because I think that I'm positively influencing people when I do that, rather than the original definition of like influencing someone to buy a puffy coat or whatever. But also, yeah, because it does help me initiate some of that like relationship and that trust before people like open the door, basically.
Yeah, like the online presence is like physical testing and training, isn't it? When it just fast forwards the learning process to begin with, and like you say, you almost like, when people see, if they've followed you and they see you at the crag and they say your name straight away and they go, oh, what are you up to? How's this project going? Or they've seen something you're up to. You already know, you feel like they know you a little bit, and then it doesn't take much to go the other way. So yeah, I totally agree. I think one thing we used to struggle with a bit was, obviously Lattice was very identified with me and Tom. I mean, even like back in the day, even though we're like always been 50-50 and like I named it and stuff, I was, people came for Tom originally, and then they had me, and then I built a reputation up. And then it's happened with other coaches over time where, it's people expect to work with certain people, and then they have to build that rapport. And I think some people always have their guards up, but one thing that's been really nice is having such confidence with such a tight team and what they do. It's great to see when I see them do stuff that I bet is better than I do, and I'd love people to see that more. A lot of the coaches are like, I'm talking about, I barely focus on my own climbing. Like I'm trying to do as much as I can, all this. Like our coaches are psyched on their own climbing. I mean, that's the biggest issue with managing a team of psyched climbers. It's like herding cats. Is, when it's the client season, it's their season, but that relatability is amazing. Like I've got so many climbers on the team that are climbing way harder than me. They've doing all these experiences, all different genres, and they're in it as well. They're like living and breathing it. So of course they can relate to their athletes, because they're like, yeah, I know I didn't send this weekend either, but next week it's on, let's go for it, let's have it, this is what we should do. Okay, don't push too hard in training. I'm not pushing too hard in training. And then you got members of the team with kids and busy family lives, and it's like, well, I'm still getting in the garage and going on the board. What's your excuse? Yeah, I know, I've got 2 kids too. Come on, crack on. And I think having a team of coaches like means that you can place the right person with the right coach. But unlike for yourself, I think I totally think that's such a nice way of doing it. It's like getting your rapport out there. You get to see the values, and they get to pick you straight away. Whilst I think, well, we're trying to place, guess people pretty quickly and put them with a coach. But yeah, if one wish I could have is the coaching team getting more in front of the camera. But that takes, like, you're exceptionally good at it, and I think not everyone enjoys it as much as we do.
Yeah, it's one cool thing about getting into coaching when I did is like seeing the growth in the last 5. I mean, I've grown a lot as a person too, but also just like the number of coaches out there putting out good, thought-provoking content is kind of staggering now. And if you just go look at the general fitness world, I'm sure there are thousands of coaches on like Instagram or whatever for just, general strength and conditioning or whatever. And many of them, I'm not inspired, to be honest. They're just like sort of a dime a dozen. But in the climbing coaching space, there are so many coaches doing interesting things and saying thought-provoking things. I don't know. It's so cool to me that we're in this time where the graph is just going up and to the right, like pretty dramatically. Still, I feel like we're all getting better and feeding off of each other in this pretty meaningful way. It just feels super cool.
Well, comp climbing is a little bit different, but even then, because of sponsorship, it's the same. It's a rare plus sum sport, And by that I mean, when you look at, like status games in life and any sort of competition, like for me to be first, you have to be second. If you want to be first, I have to be second. But in coaching and climbing, we can both climb V12, and then we can train together, and we can both climb V13, and we can both climb V14. And I think coaching, the more I know about sports science and apply to climbing, and then my guys perform, and you see that, and you take on board yours are going to do that, and then it stacks up. And even in competition climbing, because we're trying to get more funding, we're trying to get it in the media, and like if Yanya just dominates and smashes it, yes, it's a bit harder for some of the other girls, but she's getting a bigger and bigger profile. And the same with all the other athletes. The more exciting it is, the better it is, even though they might feel like the status game in there. And that's one thing I really, really love about it. And the same with, because we used to get loads of shit about coaching, you're giving away too much online. Like, think about we genuinely got so much like hate from other coaches being like, you're not, like someone said, you're giving away the secret sauce. And it's like, well, no, because we're making this more normalized, and therefore everyone's bar is raised. And the same with performance. Like, I know like Charlie from Paradigm had a coaching. I had a chat with him not so long ago, and I actually think I was probably in quite a negative headspace about coaching generally, but we were just talking about kind of like that growth of it and what to do. And I was like, it's all good, it's going in the right direction. Like, this is going to stay, because you're helping people, and if they get better, then their friends will want to get better, and then their friends will want to get better, and then all of a sudden the grades at the local wall are actually way harder, and before you know it, you're only 4 grades easier than the Japanese walls than 10. But yeah, I do like that about climbing. It's a plus sum sport.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all boats. Hey.
Yeah,
it's exactly. Nice. Your comment about it being similar to the physical assessments, I can't remember exactly what your comment was, but it sparked this story in my brain where it was right when I got my first tin deck, and I took it down to the rock gym where I lived at the time, and I was just testing whoever was in the conditioning area. And I had, talked to Tyler Nelson about some of the testing and like how to set things up and all that stuff. And I sort of knew, roughly. I had tested myself and all that. And but I was still pretty new to it. And so I was testing people, and they would be like, am I allowed to bend my arm? Am I allowed to like push my legs up into the, asking all these rules, and like, and I'm like, yeah, like just, try hard, like, try as hard as you can. They would try, and they'd be like, oh, am I allowed to like wrap my thumb? And I'd be like, yeah, give it a shot. And the numbers are inching up every time that they change something about the way that they're doing the test. And then my friend, who's like a Smith Rock turbo climber, he's super strong sport climber. He's been around Oregon forever, climbing really hard. He was doing a kettlebell workout, not even there climbing. And he just walked over and he was like, oh, give that thing a rip. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Doesn't warm up or anything. Just pulls like still the highest number I've ever seen on a 20 mil edge. And I mean, he just looked like his whole body was going to explode with effort, basically. There's no question to him about like what he was allowed to do or like how the test was supposed to be set up or anything like that. He just created so much force. And in that moment, I was like, oh, there's so much that goes into the number that an athlete can produce on a test like this that you can't capture with the app. Or seeing someone do that versus seeing someone be like not sure about how they're supposed to pull on the thing was just so informative for me at the time.
Well, we have this kind of conversation at work, and like Cam Hartley's one of the coaches I work really closely with, absolute genius, and definitely my I'd like to say protege, but I'd say he was smarter than me from the beginning. So he's definitely going to be pushing our company forward a lot. And he's doing his PhD that Lattice has been sort of funding for quite a lot of years in terms of mental fatigue and using scales and stuff for that. But he's also, I thought he'd go into research, and he was obviously really into research, but the more you go down that route, the more restrictive you realize it is. And I think it is extremely important. Science is truth, effectively, and if you can't falsify it, it's not particularly good science, and I think it is important to have that stuff. But in sport and application, like, we've just got to use every bit of knowledge. And don't say that in that scenario you could have gone, sorry, that wasn't the right technique. I will not include that into my database, and therefore that's irrelevant. And this person, it doesn't mean, it means you can't actually climb as well as you do. And that's just like so silly, isn't it? It's like, cool, so they've done it in this way. Actually, either I can, next time I want someone to get higher scores, I'll try and figure out what they did, and then is that a good method? Is that a bad method? And then you go, well, actually, it's his mental state. And Cam's a really good example. He's just over the years come round to this kind of quick application, quick learning. And I really like the the whole kind of 10,000 hours to be an expert, and now people are saying 10,000 iterations. And this is one thing we're talking about a lot at the moment is, don't worry about getting it right. Give it a go. Let's tweak it, constantly tweak it, and just like keep just learning the whole time, and like taking every little bit of information on board. Don't worry about perfect form. Don't worry about anything. 'Cause we don't do that climbing anyway. It's like, when you say, oh, you should rest with your shoulder down and your lat engaged, this is the perfect shoulder position. Like, if my face is like flat against the wall and I've got a crook shoulder and I feel like my scapula is about to explode by send, I don't really care. So yeah, I think it's a long way of saying I totally agree that you can't measure everything, but you can learn from everything. And I'd rather learn than study.
We have to have, it's the same as like building your base as a climber. Like, we have to have something to start from, even if it's not exactly specific to what it is that we're trying to achieve in the long run. Still having the numbers and doing something, testing something, I think is like super important, super valuable. And as a climber, what I took away from that test is there are certain people who are just always going to be stronger than me, even when they're on a rest day and just flinging some kettlebells around. There's nothing I'll ever be able to do to compete with them. As a coach, what I learned is having the number of someone's assessment is like useful, and maybe that's something we can use to like map back against, or I can like roughly gauge whether it's a weak area for them, stuff like that. But seeing them do the test, or seeing them do a test, is way more valuable than whatever the result of the test is. That was like the real takeaway for me. It was just like, you can learn something about how they organize their body, how they interpret the test, and just what they bring to the table.
But yeah, like that one instance, like, I wasn't there, I don't know anything about it, and I hear about it, and the first, as you're saying it just goes, cool, so he's doing kettlebell work, which means he's focused on conditioning, which means he's trying to look after himself. If he's an older athlete, that means he's doing the right things. He's doing something very functional, but it's also very power-based, good for his wrist strength, good for his shoulder mobility. Probably had an injury in the past, that's why he's doing it now. If he's able to try that hard, I'm going to have to hold him back in his training. He's going to probably be someone that pushes a little bit too hard, does his endurance too hard. His fingers are probably really tight already because he can pull off the bat without warm-up, even though they're really strong, but maybe they're not as good in a split grip. And it means that I need to work on his opening up his fingers, make sure they don't get injured, and just hold him back in training, and then let him do the rest. And you just like, every moment, like, testing for me is like you say, you get the numbers, and I think it's a really good starting place. But just seeing how people interpret those, what they say, how they turn up, how they appear in a plan. Week one on a plan, like, we do a discovery phase for the first 2 weeks, and I can already tell what kind of athlete they are by if they tick everything. If they don't tick everything and they go outside, cool, that's just a different type of athlete. If they barely do anything and they make an excuse for their testing, cool, I'll go work with fear of failure, because they don't want to appear that they can't do the testing very well. And that's the bit that's always really fun, is you can just, it's just layer on layer and layer. And like you said, the more time you have, and I actually quite like, I almost like having, I was thinking about starting to go back into more in-person assessments kind of work. So I effectively like working like a physio, though, even though I'm completely unqualified to do so, other than being an S&C coach, of sort of looking at people's bodies, trying to guess everything, like ask what job they do and all of that. And if you can fast track your knowledge base and then learn how to ask the right questions, you get that buy-in, and then all of a sudden that trust starts building immediately. There's like an old Sherlock Holmes always used to do that, where you try and guess something in someone straight away and like fast track that, and then they they believe that you've got this ridiculous abilities. Naturally, all you've done is pattern recognition, and you just learnt to spot things quicker. But that buy-in and trust is so good to do that quickly. That's for me. Coaching, that is the epitome of coaching for me. I just love it. That gives me so much pleasure.
Well, it's the inductive leap, I think, is what that's called. It's like, when you can understand the patterns well enough to jump to some kind of conclusion that's like at least in the right ballpark of where you're trying to go. And that's so much of good coaching. That's exactly what I do with movement coaching. Like, it's not like I think sometimes people think that I have like a flow chart in my mind of like, what is their knee doing? What is their elbow doing? No, you just look at the whole system and something is going to jump out at you. And probably for 3 different really high level movement coaches, you're going to get 3 different answers of what it is. But they're all probably kind of right. And then it comes back to what we were saying about like finding the right cue for the athlete. It's like, can you communicate it to the person in a way that makes sense to them?
I took part in a study with a friend of mine called Jim, who he's working with coaches actually, and we wore a headset on our eyes, and it tracked our pupils and what we were watching whilst we were coaching. And less experienced coaches, completely random. More experienced coaches start to systematize. They go, okay, elbows, knees, feet, eyes, whatever. And then the really experienced coaches, they do the same kind of pattern, and then they zone in and zone in and zone in, and then they zone in at the right points, and you get this like really cool heat map. And you can see the bias in people's coaching style through that a little bit, but then you can also see the pattern recognition again of knowing, okay, this person's setting up for dyno. And at each point of that setup, you can see why they're zoning in on that section, because that's the most important section for the movement pattern. And I quite like that way. It's a really good visual representation of what was going on in our brains.
Was this so you were wearing a headset and you're watching a video, I assume, of a person climbing?
Yeah. We did do it in person, but then I think we ended up, to control it, was watching like a big screen, and he did that.
Yeah. Wow, is that going to be published somewhere? That sounds awesome.
I think it might be published already. It's part of his PhD, which I think he's finished. I'll see if I can find it for you.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I'd love to check that out. I don't think we really talked about any of this. I mean, we kind of hit on some of these things from the outline, but was there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get into? Felt like more like a chat than anything.
I feel like I'm at the end of it. I'm in my frantic kind of mode at the end of the day, so I'm quite psyched. I'm happy talking about anything. Cool.
I mean, I don't want to cut into your evening too much, and this is the amount of time that we set aside. So I feel like maybe we should close it out.
Cool. Perfect.
Cheers.
Well, thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, always a pleasure to chat on any sort of coach philosophy jargon. Yeah, I love it.
I just had so much fun chatting to you a couple months ago, and I feel like I just want to make it a regular thing. I learn so much every time I talk to you. It's like magnetic. I'm like, oh, I got to talk to Ollie. He's gonna have some insight.
Well, I'm hoping in the next. I always say this, like to your point earlier, like I don't put much time into my coaching these days. Like I'm so bothered about building the technology for coaching and for the team. But like I said, I've got a few people that I know that are like expert physios, chiropractors, and people that I respect for these different areas. And like I've done sports massage and that, and I'd love to pull it all together and start just working in person with people. Hopefully in the next 6 months I'll have more time, and I'd be psyched to do more chats and all that kind of stuff. I do really enjoy it. Like it's nice. Like I really enjoy the conversation, and it's. I hope other people actually enjoy listening to it, because it feels, when you dart between subjects, and hopefully we give enough value or I give enough value to your audience.
No, I think you're being too humble, man. I think people enjoy what you have to say. I think they'll appreciate it.
Cheers. The same back.
Cheers. Yeah. Well, all right. I guess we'll close it out there, and I'll stop the recording. So thanks, Ollie.
Thanks very much.